Eric Cartman might seem like just a fat kid who says terrible things for laughs, but there's a lot more to him than that. Behind his schemes, his manipulations, and his complete lack of empathy, he's shaped by his need for control, his fear of powerlessness, and his desperate belief that the world owes him something. To truly get Cartman, we need to take a look at the moments that helped make him who he is, and see how his refusal to grow affects everyone around him. So, sit back, grab some cheesy poofs, and let's take a look at the story of Eric Cartman. Cartman starts out as just a regular kid with simple dreams. Before all his elaborate schemes, he's just this fat kid living with his mom in South Park. That house is his safe space, his kingdom, his little slice of Colorado where he makes the rules. His mornings never change. Leanne makes whatever he wants, he does whatever he wants, and consequences don't exist. He waves at his friends, who obviously see right through him, and heads off to school. Or, if he doesn't feel like it, he stays home. But we don't really see what's going on inside until that first season. Remember those early episodes? Cartman gets told no, and he completely falls apart. He can't handle anything less than total victory. His mom caves, his crying works, his tantrums deliver results. As the episodes pile up, he'll do literally anything to maintain control. He ends up manipulating everyone around him, rewriting reality to suit his needs, even convincing himself he's the victim in situations he created. This isn't just a kid being bratty, it's someone who's learned the world bends when you scream loud enough. That whole spoiled routine he sticks to is basically his foundation. You see it again in Weight Gain 4000 when he's competing with Kyle for an award. Kyle actually deserves recognition for his writing, but Cartman can't handle someone else winning. He doesn't try to become better. He tries to destroy Kyle's moment. And when that doesn't work, when the spotlight shifts away from him for even a second, watch what happens. He speeds up, he schemes harder, he'll gain massive amounts of weight just to get attention back on himself. It's like watching someone whose entire identity is wrapped up in being the center of every room. Cartman isn't just seeking validation because he cares about growth. He's terrified of what happens if he's not exceptional in his own mind. If he's not the most important person in South Park, then who exactly is he? And then there's An Elephant Makes Love to a Pig. Man, that episode hits different when you really think about it. Cartman casually suggests genetic experiments on living creatures, shows zero empathy for animal suffering, and treats Kyle's pet like property to be manipulated. For maybe the first time, we see a Cartman who's not just annoying, he's genuinely cruel. That constant energy, that over-the-top confidence, it's not just him being a character. It's him establishing dominance in every situation he can control. These episodes quietly build a picture of who Cartman really is when nothing's stopping him. On the surface, he's the same. Loud, obnoxious, endlessly entitled. But look closer and you'll notice the foundation. He's wildly insecure, obsessed with control, and deeply tied to how others see his power. His world doesn't run on friendship. It runs on domination, the routines, the manipulation, the constant need to win. It's not just who he is, it's what he uses to keep from feeling small. At this point in his story, everything seems manageable. The house still standing, the school bus still running, his mom still giving in to everything. Beneath it all, Cartman's entire identity relies on never being told no, and it won't take much to show what happens when someone finally does. Something's got to give. And when it does, we'll find out what really happens when being loud and manipulative just isn't enough for him anymore. Cartman's life starts off simple. Same house, same mom, same kids to torture. But that all shifts when he realizes he doesn't just want to be heard. He wants to be in charge. And hey, if you're into character breakdowns like this, make sure to hit that subscribe button. We've got plenty more deep dives into your favorite animated icons coming up. And trust me, you won't want to miss them. Every villain has that moment when they realize they're good at being bad. For Cartman, it all starts with a few small victories that teach him something dangerous. Right from early season 2, we see him standing at the edge of something bigger. He's practiced throwing tantrums so many times, it's become routine. But now, he's starting to understand something more useful. You don't have to just cry until mom gives in. You can orchestrate outcomes. Then reality hands him opportunities. In Chicken Lover, Cartman gets deputized as a police officer after Officer Barbrady can't read. They think giving a kid a badge and authority is temporary, harmless even. Most kids would play pretend and go home. Cartman sees it differently. The moment that badge is on his chest, something clicks. He's not just playing cop. He's drunk on the power. He starts beating people with his nightstick for minor infractions. Respect my authority becomes his catchphrase, but it's more than comedy. It's a window into what he craves. Not respect earned through character or action. Respect demanded through force and position. Without hesitation, he abuses every ounce of authority given to him. His actions escalate so fast, they're almost hard to track. Traffic violations turn into beatings. Questions turn into arrests. The town watches this unfold, and for a moment, they're too shocked to stop it. But here's what Cartman learns. People comply. When you have authority, even illegitimate authority, people fall in line. Not because they respect you, but because they fear the consequences of resisting. Just like that, the annoying kid becomes somebody with power. This matters because it shows Cartman's true evolution. When people try to contain him, he doesn't accept boundaries. He finds leverage. When the world says this is inappropriate, he points to the badge they gave him and says he's just doing his job. But here's what he doesn't realize yet. Authority isn't the same as power. Authority is borrowed. Power is taken. And Cartman's about to learn the difference. Fast forward to season 7, and Christian rock hard happens. Cartman makes a bet with Kyle that he can get a platinum album before Kyle's band does. But Cartman doesn't know anything about music. He doesn't have talent or connections. What he does have is pattern recognition. He studies the Christian rock industry and sees the exploit. The music doesn't have to be good. It just has to hit the right emotional buttons. Replace Baby with Jesus and love songs, add some tears and devotion, and suddenly you've got a Christian hit. So he forms Faith +1, gets Butters and Token to join, and proceeds to game the entire system. The songs are shallow, transparently manipulative, and completely cynical. But they work. Christian audiences eat it up. Cartman's not even hiding his contempt. He talks openly about exploiting believers. Yet the platinum records start rolling in. He's doing exactly what he said he'd do. Taking a system, finding its weakness, and extracting everything he can. Token quits when he realizes what they're doing. Butters stays because Butters always stays. And Cartman? He's learning that you don't have to believe in something to profit from it. You just have to understand what other people believe and give them a product that confirms it. Then comes Ginger Kids in season 9. This one's different. This one shows the full scope of what Cartman can do when he stops thinking small. It starts as typical Cartman bigotry. He gives a presentation calling red-headed pale kids with freckles soulless. It's offensive, stupid, and exactly what you'd expect. Kyle and Stan and Kenny decide to teach him a lesson. They sneak into his room at night, dye his hair red, paint freckles on his face, and make him think he's become a ginger. When Cartman wakes up and sees himself in the mirror, he doesn't question it. He accepts it immediately and pivots. Within hours, he's gone from hating gingers to leading a ginger supremacy movement. He organizes rallies, creates uniforms, recruits followers, starts talking about ginger pride and the extermination of non-gingers. The speed of his transformation is stunning. There's no soul-searching, no reflection on his previous bigotry, just instant adaptation to maximize his position. What makes this episode crucial is the reveal. When Kyle and Stan show him the photos proving they dyed his hair, expecting shame or anger, Cartman doesn't care. He's not embarrassed. He's not even particularly upset about being tricked. Because the lie gave him something real. Followers. A movement. Power over others. And in Cartman's world, that's all that matters. These 3 episodes chart a progression. From temporary authority to gaming systems to creating mass movements. Each one teaches him something new about power. Authority is intoxicating. Systems can be exploited. And people, if you push the right buttons, will follow anyone who speaks with confidence. He's not just getting his way anymore. He's controlling the game. This journey isn't about physical distance. It's about discovering what he's capable of when he stops accepting the world as it is and starts bending it to his will. By the time these schemes play out, the old Cartman is still there. Loud, obnoxious, demanding. But now there's something else. A understanding that manipulation isn't just about crying to mom. It's about identifying what people want, what they fear, what they believe, and using all of it. When he walks away from these experiences, something's different. Not better, different. The cheesy poofs taste the same, the bus stop looks the same. He's still Cartman, still impossible, but now he knows something his friends don't. He can make people do things, not through friendship or persuasion, but through understanding their weaknesses and exploiting them without hesitation. And later on, you can tell he uses these lessons. The schemes get more elaborate. The manipulations cut deeper. There's a confidence now that wasn't there before. A certainty that any system can be gamed, any person can be controlled, any situation can be turned to his advantage if he's willing to go far enough. After discovering he can manipulate people and systems, Cartman thinks he's untouchable. But power creates opposition, and there's a difference between getting your way and facing what happens when your schemes collide with people who won't play along. That line is thinner than he thinks. Most people, when they grab power, eventually face a reckoning. For Cartman, that reckoning keeps getting scheduled and then doesn't arrive. And that might be the most dangerous thing that ever happened to him. Most characters have that moment where life forces them to look in the mirror, where staying the same becomes more painful than changing. For Cartman, it's not some moment where that happens. It's every moment where it should happen and doesn't. It's in the way consequences arrive, stare him in the face, and then somehow dissolve. And one of the clearest places we see this pattern is in the aftermath of his worst actions. Take Scott Tenorman Must Die. Season 5, Episode 4. This isn't just another Cartman scheme. This is the line. Scott Tenorman, an 8th grader, sells Cartman his pubic hair for $10. When Cartman realizes he's been scammed, he wants revenge. Normal revenge would be embarrassing Scott at school or getting his money back. Cartman doesn't do normal revenge. He orchestrates an elaborate plan where he tricks Scott's parents into trespassing on a farmer's property, knowing the farmer will shoot them. Then he has their bodies ground into chili. Then he hosts a chili cook-off where Scott eats his own parents. While Scott breaks down in horror and grief, Cartman stands there, and he doesn't feel guilt. He doesn't question what he's done. He feels satisfaction, pride even. The episode ends with Cartman licking Scott's tears while Radiohead watches in disgust. This should break something in him. This should be the moment where he realizes he's crossed into territory he can't come back from. Instead, he goes home, eats dinner, watches TV, plays with his toys. Life continues. The show doesn't dwell on consequences because for Cartman, there aren't any. Nobody arrests him. Nobody puts him in therapy. His mom doesn't even find out the full story. He just gets away with it. And that's the lesson he learns. Not, what I did was monstrous, but I can do monstrous things and life keeps going. You see the pattern repeat in Casa Bonita from Season 7. Cartman wants to go to Casa Bonita, a Mexican restaurant with cliff divers and entertainment. Kyle's mom says Kyle can bring 3 friends. Kyle chooses Stan, Kenny, and Butters, not Cartman. For once, someone's actually excluding him based on his behavior. This is a natural consequence. You treat people badly, they don't invite you to fun things. Cartman's response? He tells Butters that a meteor is going to hit Earth and everyone's going underground to wait it out. He locks Butters in a bomb shelter, then shows up at Kyle's house pretending Butters' parents told him to take Butters' place. The lie works. Cartman goes to Casa Bonita, has a great time. Meanwhile, Butters is in that shelter, terrified, rationing food, preparing for the end of the world. When Butters is eventually found, traumatized and confused, what happens to Cartman? He gets grounded. That's it. Grounded. For kidnapping and psychological torture. And the grounding doesn't even stick because the show moves on. Next episode, he's back to baseline. No growth, no reflection, just another scheme in the books. Then there's Breast Cancer Show Ever in Season 12. Wendy Testaberger calls Cartman out for making jokes about breast cancer. He mocks her. She challenges him to a fight after school. Cartman, for the first time, shows genuine fear. He spends the entire episode trying to get out of the fight. He goes to the principal, tries to get Wendy suspended, attempts to manipulate his way out of physical consequences. None of it works. After school, in front of the whole student body, Wendy beats him. Brutally. It's not close. She breaks his dignity in front of everyone who's ever had to tolerate him. This should be a teaching moment, a humbling. The bully finally getting what he deserves. But watch what happens after. Cartman doesn't become less of a bully. He doesn't respect Wendy more. He doesn't learn that physical intimidation has limits. He just finds different targets. People he knows won't fight back like Wendy did. The core behavior doesn't change, only the calculation of risk. We see this same pattern in Fish Sticks from Season 13. Jimmy creates a joke. Do you like fish sticks? Yes. Do you like putting fish sticks in your mouth? Yes. Then you're a gay fish. Simple, silly, perfect for South Park's sense of humor. The joke goes viral. Everyone's telling it. Cartman, who was present when Jimmy created it, starts believing he came up with it. Not as a lie to others. He genuinely rewrites the memory in his mind. The episode shows his delusion growing. He argues with Jimmy about who created the joke, gets angry when people credit Jimmy, eventually convinces himself so thoroughly that he's the originator that he can't see reality anymore. Multiple people tell him the truth. Video evidence exists. None of it penetrates. This isn't funny forgetfulness. This is Cartman's defense mechanism. When reality contradicts what he needs to believe about himself, he simply rejects reality. He reconstructs the past to serve his present needs. And because nobody can physically force him to acknowledge truth, he never has to. The pattern becomes clear. Scheme, consequence, mental rewrite, repeat. Each cycle should teach him limits. Instead, each cycle teaches him he can redefine limits. In the Coon trilogy from Season 14, Cartman creates a superhero persona called the Coon. When the other kids create their own heroes and don't make him the leader, he has a meltdown. He doesn't accept that maybe he's not leadership material. He doesn't try to be a better team member. Instead, he makes a deal with Cthulhu, an ancient evil entity, to kill everyone who won't follow him. Cthulhu starts destroying the city, killing people, causing mass chaos. Cartman rides on Cthulhu's shoulder, directing the carnage, eliminating his rivals. When the other kids finally stop him, when the dust settles and people are dead, what changes? Nothing. Cartman goes back to school. The next episode treats it like it never happened. South Park's episodic format becomes his greatest ally. These episodes show us how Cartman avoids growing up. It's not that he refuses change outright, it's that he's built an immunity to every mechanism that forces change. Guilt? He doesn't feel it. Shame? He's learned to deflect it or not register it at all. Physical consequences? They hurt in the moment but don't alter behavior. Social consequences? He just finds new social circles or forces the old ones to take him back through manipulation. He keeps pushing forward, even when he's hurting people, just to avoid the fundamental question. What if I'm the problem? For Cartman, the hardest part wasn't doing terrible things. It was the idea that terrible things might define him as terrible, so he never entertains that idea. Ever. That's what makes Cartman's consequences so empty. When they arrive, we understand they mean nothing. It means the world tried to teach him, and he chose not to learn. Not because he couldn't understand the lesson, but because accepting it would require him to be something other than what he is. And in that refusal to change, in that active choice to remain static while the world tries to push him forward, we see something darker than simple evil. We see someone who's discovered that if you're shameless enough, persistent enough, willing to go further than anyone else, you can get away with almost anything. And maybe that's why it stings. Not just because he's awful, but because somewhere, in smaller ways, we've all watched people get away with things they shouldn't. We've all seen consequence-free cruelty and wondered why the universe doesn't balance the scales. Cartman has a way of avoiding consequences, whether it's rewriting history in his mind or simply outlasting everyone's ability to hold him accountable. But even he can't exist in a vacuum. The people around him, whether they want to or not, become part of his ecosystem. And that's where his relationships come in. When everything starts to feel scripted, when the schemes aren't landing with the same satisfaction, when even his victories feel hollow, who shapes Cartman? If you're expecting mentors and growth, you're watching the wrong show. The people closest to Cartman don't elevate him. They reveal him. Even the worst person in South Park needs someone around them. Not a mentor offering wisdom. Not a friend providing genuine support. Cartman needs an ecosystem. He needs people to manipulate, to test boundaries against, to validate his existence through their reactions. The people closest to him aren't shaping him into something better. They're mirrors showing exactly who he is, and some of them are enablers making sure he never has to change. Let's start with Leanne Cartman. She's not raising a son. She's surrendering to one. Every single day. Watch any early episode and you'll see the pattern. Cartman demands something unreasonable. Leanne hesitates for half a second. Cartman escalates, screaming, crying, threatening. Leanne caves every time. In the episode Tust from Season 10, It Gets Laid Bare, Leanne's so desperate to control Cartman's behavior that she calls Nanny 911. They send an expert, then another, then Caesar Milan, the dog whisperer, who treats Cartman like an animal that needs behavioral conditioning. And it works. Cartman starts following rules, showing respect, acting almost human. The transformation is remarkable. But it requires Leanne to maintain boundaries, to say no and mean it, to accept that her son will be unhappy sometimes, and that's okay. She can't do it. The moment Cesar leaves, the moment Cartman throws a fit, she collapses, gives him whatever he wants. Within minutes, all the progress evaporates. Cartman's back to his baseline, and now he knows something even more powerful. Professional intervention can't save him from himself if his mom won't enforce it. Leanne isn't a character in his story, she's a resource he extracts from. When he wants something, she's the ATM. When he needs validation, she's the mirror. When he demands unconditional acceptance of his worst behavior, she provides it without question. This isn't love, it's enablement dressed up as maternal devotion. From her, Cartman learns the foundational lesson of his life. If you escalate hard enough, fast enough, people will give you what you want just to make it stop. That lesson shapes everything that comes after. Then there's Kyle Broflovsky. If Leanne is Cartman's enabler, Kyle is his purpose. Their rivalry isn't just comedy. It's the organizing principle of Cartman's entire existence. Kyle is smart, moral, comes from a stable family with boundaries and expectations. Everything Cartman isn't, and Cartman cannot stand it. Watch how much energy Cartman devotes to tormenting Kyle specifically. The anti-Semitic jokes aren't random. They're targeted, calculated, designed to hit Kyle where it hurts most. His identity, his family, his values. In Tonsil Trouble from Season 12, Cartman contracts HIV. Instead of dealing with his diagnosis, his first instinct is to give it to Kyle. Not out of desperation, out of spite. So Kyle will suffer exactly as much as him. He succeeds, gives Kyle HIV, watches him process the horror, and feels satisfied. The medical crisis is secondary. The shared suffering is the point. Kyle fights back, constantly. He's the only one who consistently calls Cartman out, refuses to let things slide, actually tries to stop the schemes before they hurt people. And that resistance is exactly what Cartman needs. Without Kyle pushing back, there's no game. No validation of his cleverness when he wins. No satisfaction in the victory. Their dynamic is toxic codependency. Kyle needs someone to oppose or his moral framework has no purpose. Cartman needs someone who takes him seriously as a threat or his schemes feel empty. They're locked together in a cycle neither can escape. From Kyle, Cartman learns that having a nemesis gives your life meaning, that someone opposing you isn't a problem to solve, it's a relationship to maintain. Because the fight itself, the ongoing battle, that's what makes existence interesting. Next is Butters' stotch. Poor Butters. If Kyle is Cartman's rival and Leanne is his resource, Butters is his victim, his favorite toy. The one he breaks repeatedly because Butters keeps trusting him. Remember Casa Bonita? Cartman locks Butters in a bomb shelter, tells him the world is ending, and steals his spot at a restaurant. Butters sits in that shelter, terrified, rationing food, preparing for nuclear fallout. The psychological damage is real and lasting. And when it's over, Cartman feels nothing. No guilt, no apology, just mild annoyance that he got caught. Or the tale of Scrody McBoogerballs from season 14. The boys write an intentionally disgusting book that somehow becomes a cultural phenomenon. When the book's content starts causing problems, Cartman immediately volunteers Butters to take the blame. Butters, who didn't write a word of it, becomes the public face of the controversy, faces the consequences, bears the shame, while Cartman watches from safety. In Butterballs, also season 14, Cartman creates an elaborate anti-bullying campaign. Not because he cares about bullying, because he wants to make a viral video and become famous. He uses Butters as his test subject, his example of a bullied kid, and manufactures situations to capture footage. When the campaign fails, when the attention doesn't materialize, he abandons it, moves on, leaves Butters processing what just happened. What makes Cartman's treatment of Butters so revealing is the calculation. He targets Butters specifically because Butters is kind, trusting, and eager to please. Those aren't flaws in Butters, they're features Cartman exploits. A healthier person would see Butters' goodness and want to protect it. Cartman sees vulnerability and opportunity. From Butters, Cartman learns that nice people finish last. That kindness is weakness. That if someone keeps trusting you after you hurt them, you can hurt them again and again, and they'll still come back. Stan Marsh represents something different. He's the closest thing to a normal moral center in the group. Not as rigid as Kyle, not as naive as Butters, not as absent as Kenny used to be. Stan tries to be reasonable. He's the one saying, "Guys, maybe we shouldn't," when schemes start escalating. The voice of moderation. Cartman ignores him completely. Stan's reasonableness doesn't compute in Cartman's worldview. There's no angle to exploit, no button to push that yields results. So Stan becomes background noise, present but irrelevant. From Stan, Cartman learns nothing. And that might be the lesson. Some people can't teach you anything because you've already decided they have nothing you want. Finally, there's Kenny McCormick. Poor Kenny. Literally poor. From the poorest family in South Park. And Cartman treats that poverty as moral failing. He's openly contemptuous of Kenny's economic status. Makes jokes about his parka, his family, his inability to afford things. When Kenny dies in early seasons, Cartman's reaction is casual at best. Sometimes he doesn't react at all. Kenny's death becomes routine, expected, part of the background. And when Kenny comes back, Cartman doesn't question it or value the resurrection. It's just how things are. From Kenny, Cartman learns that some people are disposable, that class matters, that if society has already decided someone is worth less, you're free to treat them that way without consequence. What makes these relationships so critical is how they form a complete ecosystem. Leanne provides unconditional resources. Kyle provides worthy opposition. Butters provides easy victories. Stan provides nothing because Cartman won't let him. Kenny provides a hierarchy where Cartman isn't at the bottom. Each relationship teaches him something, and every lesson is toxic. Escalate to win. Enemies give life meaning. The kind are weak. The reasonable are boring. The poor are lesser. These dynamics never evolve into anything healthier. Leanne never sets real boundaries. Kyle never stops engaging. Butters never develops immunity. Stan never breaks through. Kenny never gets respect. The relationships are stuck because change would require Cartman to see these people as fully human, to value Kyle's intelligence beyond the rivalry, to protect Butter's innocence instead of exploiting it, to respect his mother's humanity instead of treating her as supply source. He can't do that, won't do that. Because the moment he starts seeing people as people instead of functions, his entire worldview collapses. The manipulations stop working if you care about the person you're manipulating. The schemes lose their appeal if you consider the human cost. At the Krusty Krab, SpongeBob had Sandy pushing him to grow. In South Park, Cartman has mirrors showing him exactly who he is, and he likes what he sees. Kyle doesn't give Cartman answers, he gives him conflict. Leanne doesn't teach boundaries, she erases them. Butters doesn't build Cartman's character, he reveals its absence. And that's what makes these relationships so perfectly designed for what Cartman becomes. They're not people to learn from, they're instruments to play. Each one serves a purpose in his ecosystem. Each one enables the next terrible thing by being exactly who they are. These relationships don't make Cartman better. They show him what he can get away with. That permission, whether from his mother's weakness or Kyle's predictable moral outrage or Butter's endless capacity for forgiveness, only pushes him further. Because once you've manipulated everyone close to you and faced no real consequences, where do you go next? Somewhere darker. Cartman's relationships have shown him the limits of his power over others. But what happens when he decides there are no limits? When making someone cry isn't enough, when schemes need to cut deeper, when he crosses a line no one should cross. That's when we find out who Eric Cartman really is, and it's worse than anyone imagined. Scott Tenorman and beyond. Cartman's world was built on small cruelties, stolen lunches, petty schemes, manipulated friends. For him, consequences weren't real because stakes were never high. Everything shifts in Season 5, Episode 4. No joke setup, no cartoonish resolution, just Cartman discovering that if you're willing to go further than anyone else, you can win anything, and nothing is the same after that. Scott Tenorman Must Die starts simple enough. Scott, an 8th grader, sells Cartman his pubic hair for $10. Cartman thinks having pubes will make him a man. When he realizes he's been scammed when the other kids laugh at how stupid he was, something breaks. Not his spirit, his restraint. He wants revenge. First attempt, he tries to train a pony to bite Scott's wiener off. It fails. Second attempt involves a scheme with Radiohead, Scott's favorite band. Also fails. Each failure makes him angrier, more determined. The other kids tell him to let it go, move on, accept he got fooled. That's what normal people do. Cartman isn't normal people, so he creates the plan. The final plan. He learns that Scott's parents like to trespass on Farmer Denkins's property. He tips off the farmer, knowing the farmer shoots trespassers. The parents show up right on schedule. The farmer shoots them both. Dead. Then Cartman somehow convinces the farmer to let him take the bodies. He brings them to a butcher, has them ground into meat, makes chili. Then he hosts a chili cook-off, invites Scott, invites Radiohead, sets up the whole thing like a festival. Scott shows up expecting to humiliate Cartman one more time. Instead, Cartman serves him a bowl of chili. Scott eats it, enjoys it even, comments on how good it tastes. That's when Cartman reveals what's in the bowl. Scott's parents. Scott just ate his own parents. The realization hits in stages. Confusion, disbelief, horror, complete psychological breakdown. Scott starts crying. Not regular crying. The kind of crying that comes from somewhere you can't come back from. His mind is breaking in real time. And Cartman? He stands there savoring the moment. No regret, no shock at what he's done. He literally licks Scott's tears off his face while explaining how every step of the plan worked perfectly. Radiohead is there, watching. Tom York calls Cartman the most uncool kid they've ever met. That's the closest thing to moral judgment in the entire episode. The show ends, credits roll. Next episode, Cartman's eating breakfast with his mom like nothing happened. Think about it. He killed someone's parents, made them into chili, fed it to their son, and felt proud. This isn't cartoon violence anymore. This is premeditated psychological torture. the kind that ends with someone in prison or institutionalized. But this is South Park. So it just becomes another episode in the catalog. Another thing Cartman did. What makes Scott Tenorman so significant isn't just the act, it's what it reveals. Up until this point, you could argue Cartman was all bark. Annoying, yes. Bigoted, absolutely. But maybe not genuinely dangerous. This episode answers the question. He's dangerous, genuinely, terrifyingly dangerous, and he likes being dangerous. The line between antagonist and evil exists. Cartman crosses it and keeps walking. Later episodes build on this foundation. In The Passion of the Jew from Season 8, Cartman watches Mel Gibson's movie about Christ's suffering and decides to use the emotional manipulation techniques to start his own movement. He dresses like Hitler, starts talking about a final solution to his problems, leads rallies where people chant and salute. The imagery isn't subtle. The show is directly paralleling Cartman's rhetoric with Nazi Germany, and it works. People follow him, not because they're evil, but because he's tapped into something. Group identity, shared grievance, the seductive comfort of blaming outsiders. When Kyle tries to stop it, when he points out what Cartman's actually doing, most people don't listen. They're too caught up in the movement. Cartman doesn't back down when confronted with the Nazi parallels. He leans in. Because what's the point of power if you don't use it? Then there's the Coon trilogy. Cartman creates a superhero persona and expects everyone to follow his leadership. When they don't, when they create their own hero team and democratically elect someone else as leader, Cartman makes a deal with Cthulhu, an ancient cosmic horror. He rides on Cthulhu's shoulder as it destroys the city, points at his former friends, watches as Cthulhu eliminates them one by one. People die, real people in the South Park universe. Buildings collapse, families are destroyed, all because Cartman couldn't handle not being in charge. When it's over, when the other kids finally stop him, there's no reflection, no moment where he considers that maybe, possibly, he went too far. He's just annoyed he lost. These episodes show us something the earlier seasons hinted at. Cartman doesn't have a line. He doesn't have a moral boundary he won't cross if crossing it gets him what he wants. The only thing stopping him is practical limitation. If he could push a button and kill everyone who annoyed him, he'd push it, without hesitation. Then he'd go get cheesy poofs. Most of us, when we picture revenge, imagine winning an argument or succeeding where they failed. We fantasize about the person who wronged us feeling regret or acknowledging they were wrong. We don't imagine this because we have a line, some foundational belief that certain actions are unthinkable regardless of provocation. Cartman doesn't have that line. He had it removed, or maybe it was never installed in the first place. By the time they reach Scott Tenorman's broken psyche and Cartman's satisfied grin, that version of him is gone. The version who was just annoying, just a bratty kid with boundary issues. That character doesn't exist anymore. They don't win because Cartman suddenly got smarter or more powerful. They win because he was willing to destroy someone completely while everyone else hesitated at basic human decency. When he gets back to his regular life, eating cheesy poofs and watching TV, something's just different. The show isn't quite the same. He's still Cartman, still loud, still ridiculous, but now we know. We know what he's capable of, and the audience watches with different discomfort, different understanding of what we're laughing at. After everything Cartman proves he'll do, you'd think the world would stop him. You'd think consequences would finally materialize. But that's not how this works. Instead of facing justice for crossing unforgivable lines, he just continues. The people around him have to decide whether to keep being collateral damage or finally take him seriously as the threat he is. Once you've shown everyone exactly who you are, the world splits into two groups, people who believe you and people who think you'll change. Cartman has shown everyone. Some people still don't believe it. They think the next scheme will be the last, that eventually he'll grow out of it, learn empathy, become better. They're wrong. And what comes next proves it. Now Cartman's out there, having crossed every line and proven himself capable of genuine evil. He's taken risks, destroyed lives, and changed how everyone sees him. But now, he's up against something different. Resistance. Not from wild schemes or elaborate plans, but from people who've finally had enough. From physical threats he can't talk his way out of. From his own body betraying him. And sometimes, from reality itself saying no. Wendy Testaberger has had enough. Season 12, Episode 9. Breast cancer show ever? Cartman's making jokes about breast cancer during class. Wendy tells him to stop. He doesn't. She asks again. He mocks her. So she does something nobody's done before. She challenges him to a fight. After school. In front of everyone. Cartman's face changes. The confidence drains. He's faced down adults, orchestrated murders, manipulated entire systems. But a physical fight with someone his own size? That's different. That's real consequence he can't scheme away. He spends the entire episode trying to escape. Goes to Principal Victoria, tries to get Wendy suspended for making threats, doesn't work. Tries to get his mom to keep him home sick. She won't. Attempts to broker peace through intermediaries. Wendy refuses. The clock ticks down. After school approaches, Cartman's running out of options. When the final bell rings, the whole school gathers. Everyone who's ever been tormented by Cartman, everyone who's watched him get away with everything, they're all there. Waiting. Wendy walks out calm, focused, ready. Cartman tries one last manipulation. You can't hit me, I'm a boy. Wendy doesn't care. The fight starts. It's not close. She beats him. Thoroughly. Breaks his nose, bruises his face, destroys his dignity in front of every witness he's ever needed to maintain his reputation. He doesn't fight back effectively. Can't. All that bravado, all that cruelty, it doesn't translate to actual physical courage. When someone finally stands up to him with force he can't counter, he crumbles. But here's the thing. He learns nothing. Next episode, he's back to baseline. Maybe more careful about who he antagonizes directly, but not because he's developed respect, because he's calculated risk. Wendy proved she'll follow through. Fine, he'll target people who won't. The core behavior doesn't change, only the target selection. That's what makes this different from normal character development. Most people, when they get humiliated like that, have a moment of reflection. They think about why it happened, what they could do differently. Cartman just files it under avoid physical confrontation with Wendy and moves on. Then there's PC Principal. Season 19 brings a new authority figure to South Park Elementary. PC Principal is bigger than Cartman, stronger, and completely immune to his usual tactics. He doesn't care about manipulation, doesn't listen to excuses. When you cross his line, he physically intimidates you into compliance. Cartman tries his standard approach, pushes boundaries, makes offensive jokes, tests how far he can go. PC Principal shuts it down immediately, gets in his face, makes it clear that the old rules don't apply anymore. For the first time, there's an adult in the school who Cartman genuinely fears. Watch how Cartman adapts. He doesn't become less bigoted. He becomes more careful about when and where he expresses it. Around PC Principal, he performs compliance, says the right things, uses the approved language. But the second PC Principal isn't watching, he's back to his usual self. It's not growth, it's survival strategy. In Gluten-Free Ebola, Season 18, Cartman faces a different kind of resistance, his own body. The town becomes convinced that gluten is toxic. Cartman, who lives on junk food, suddenly can't eat anything he wants. His diet is restricted, his comfort is disrupted. For once, there's a problem he can't manipulate or scheme his way out of. He tries anyway, sneaks forbidden food, lies about ingredients, attempts to convince everyone the gluten fear is overblown, but his body doesn't care about his arguments. When he eats gluten, he gets sick. Actually sick. Physical consequences he can't rewrite in his mind or talk his way past. The episode shows him genuinely suffering. Not emotionally. Physically. His stomach hurts. He's weak. Vulnerable in a way he never is normally. And there's no scheme that fixes it. No manipulation that makes the pain stop. Just reality asserting itself. When the gluten crisis passes, When he can eat normally again, does he gain perspective? Does he develop empathy for people who live with actual dietary restrictions or health problems? No. He just goes back to eating garbage. Relieved the problem solved itself. Kyle beats him sometimes. Not often, but it happens. In various episodes, Kyle's superior intelligence or moral framework wins the day, stops a scheme before it fully develops, exposes a lie that Cartman needed everyone to believe, rallies people against him. Each time it happens, Cartman rages. Not because Kyle proved him wrong, because Kyle won. The content doesn't matter, only the outcome, and each loss to Kyle feeds into their dynamic, makes Cartman more determined to win the next round. The rivalry intensifies rather than resolving. There's an episode, Put It Down from season 21, where Cartman actually tries to help someone. Token's girlfriend is breaking up with him because Token won't stop playing with his phone at dinner. Cartman, freshly in his relationship with Heidi, recognizes the pattern. He tries to coach Token, tells him to put the phone down, to be present, to value the relationship over the distraction. It almost works. Token listens, takes the advice, the relationship improves. And for a brief moment, you see something different in Cartman. Not kindness exactly, but recognition that sometimes helping someone else serves your interests. If Token's relationship survives, it validates Cartman's own relationship choices. The help is real, but the motivation is still selfish. He's not being a good friend, he's protecting his own narrative about relationships. In Poor and Stupid from season 14, Cartman decides he wants to be a NASCAR driver. But he thinks NASCAR drivers are poor and stupid, so he tries to become both. Gives away his possessions, starts acting aggressively unintelligent, puts himself through increasingly degrading situations to achieve what he thinks is the right image. It backfires. He doesn't become a NASCAR driver. He just becomes a poor, stupid version of himself with nothing to show for it. The episode ends with him having to rebuild from a position of genuine disadvantage he created for himself. Even then, the lesson doesn't stick. He blames the scheme's failure on external factors, never considers that maybe his understanding of NASCAR drivers was wrong. Maybe his whole approach was flawed. Just files it under schemes that didn't work and moves on to the next idea. Let's be real. Cartman doesn't face typical villains. He faces reality. He faces people who won't be manipulated. He faces his own physical limitations. He faces the occasional moment where someone smarter or stronger or more determined says no and means it, and every single time, his response is the same. Rage at the setback. Brief adjustment of tactics. Return to baseline. He doesn't develop immunity to consequences through growth. He develops it through shamelessness, through absolute refusal to internalize the lesson. Here's the tough part. Cartman's world doesn't always reward him for being terrible. He gets embarrassed, laughed at, beaten down, and occasionally faces real opposition. He gives everything he has to schemes that blow up in his face. But he doesn't stop. Most people would learn. Most people would develop some capacity for shame. But not Cartman. He keeps going. And that's what makes this part of his story so revealing. It's not about winning anymore. It's about refusing to acknowledge defeat. Despite all the setbacks, people trying to stop him, his own body failing him, reality itself pushing back, Cartman never admits he's wrong. Every challenge teaches him nothing except how to avoid that specific challenge next time. He doesn't become stronger from these tests. He becomes more calculated, more careful about who he targets and when, more strategic about which battles to fight and which to avoid. But the core remains untouched, unchanged, unmoved by any amount of opposition. That's not resilience. That's something else entirely. Something that looks like strength from the outside, but is really just the inability to process feedback. Normal people face resistance and adjust. Cartman faces resistance and finds new angles. Normal people get beaten down and question themselves. Cartman gets beaten down and blames everyone else. If you're enjoying this deep dive into one of TV's most fascinating monsters, give it a quick like and maybe subscribe. Helps a ton. Cartman faces his toughest tests yet from opponents he can't manipulate, and limits he can't ignore. The real battle isn't external, though. It's the internal question he never asks. What if I'm the problem? But Cartman doesn't do self-reflection. He does something else instead. He falls apart in the quietest, most manipulative way possible. By now, Cartman's been through it all. Elaborate schemes, massive victories, crushing defeats, and everything in between. Through it all, he's managed to keep his narcissism alive, but even the most delusional character eventually hits moments where reality breaks through. And that's exactly where Cartman goes next. Not to growth, but to something more unsettling, the realization that he might be fundamentally alone. It happens in Season 23, Episode 5. Cupid Yay. Cartman's walking through the halls at school when he sees Token. His mind conjures Cupid Cartman, a hallucination representing his desire for friendship. The Cupid version shoots an arrow at Token, and suddenly, Cartman believes he's in love. Not romantic love, friendship love. The desperate, clingy kind that reveals just how isolated he actually is. He starts following Token everywhere, showing up at his house, calling constantly, trying to force hangouts. Token, understandably, wants nothing to do with it. He's got his own friends, his own life. Cartman's reputation precedes him. Nobody wants to be his best friend because everyone knows what happens to people who get close to him. But Cartman can't hear that. He doubles down, gets more aggressive about it. The more Token pulls away, the harder Cartman pushes. It's not about Token specifically. It's about the fact that Cartman wants something and can't have it. And for once, that something isn't a scheme or revenge. It's connection. The episode plays it for comedy at first. Cartman doing romantic comedy tropes but with friendship. Grand gestures, public declarations, elaborate plans to win Token over. But underneath the jokes, there's something genuinely sad. He doesn't know how to be friends with someone. Doesn't understand that friendship requires mutual respect and boundaries. He only knows how to take. When Token finally snaps, when he tells Cartman explicitly that they're not friends and never will be, something cracks. Not permanently, not enough to change him. But for a moment, you see it. The loneliness he usually buries under schemes and cruelty. The awareness that nobody actually likes him. He goes home, sits in his room, and for once, he's not plotting revenge. He's just sitting with the realization that he's alone and it's his own fault. It doesn't last. By next episode, he's back to baseline. But that moment happened, that vulnerability existed, and it's terrifying because it reveals what he's spent his entire life avoiding. The truth that if you're terrible to everyone, eventually everyone leaves. Go back to Season 5, to Cartman Land. Cartman inherits $1 million from his grandmother. First thing he does, buys an amusement park, Cartman Land, and he makes a rule. Nobody else can come. It's his park, only his. No lines, no crowds, no sharing. At first, he's ecstatic. Rides whatever he wants, whenever he wants. No compromises, no accommodating other people's preferences. Pure freedom. But maintaining a theme park requires staff, security, ride operators, maintenance. So he has to let some people in, then safety inspectors, then, to pay for operations, paying customers. The park slowly fills with other people. The thing he bought specifically to be alone becomes crowded, and Cartman rages against it. Not because the park doesn't work, because it works too well, because isolation is expensive and unsustainable, because even he can't exist in a vacuum. When he eventually loses the park due to medical bills from a ride malfunction, he's furious. But the anger isn't really about the park. It's about learning that his fantasy of complete isolation doesn't work in practice, that he needs other people, even if he hates needing them. Season 15 brings You're Getting Old and Asperger's. Stan starts experiencing depression. Everything looks and sounds like literal shit to him. He can't enjoy anything. His friendship with Kyle deteriorates. His parents divorce. The entire social structure of South Park starts breaking down. And Cartman? He's affected too. Not by Stan's depression directly, by the disruption to his ecosystem. Stan's depression means the group dynamic shifts. Kyle's distracted. Their usual patterns get interrupted. Cartman thrives on predictable social structures he can manipulate. When those structures collapse, he's lost. He doesn't reach out to Stan, doesn't try to help, just watches his world become less stable and doesn't know how to fix it, because fixing it would require caring about someone else's well-being for reasons beyond self-interest. The episodes resolve with everything mostly returning to normal, but they show something important. Cartman's entire existence depends on other people being there for him to manipulate. When they're gone or changed, he's adrift. Then there's God Go from Season 10. Cartman can't wait 3 weeks for the Nintendo Wii to release, so he has Butters freeze him cryogenically. The plan is to wake up in 3 weeks, get the Wii, and enjoy it without the wait. But something goes wrong. He wakes up 500 years in the future. The world has changed completely. Everyone he knew is dead. The social structures he understood don't exist. He's alone in the most literal sense possible, lost in time with no connection to anything familiar. And he breaks down, not in his usual manipulative way, in genuine terror and confusion. He spends the episodes trying desperately to get back to his own time, not because the future is bad, because he needs the familiar, needs his mom, his frenemies, his predictable world where he knows the rules and how to exploit them. The isolation of being unstuck in time reveals how much he depends on the very people he treats terribly. When he finally gets back, he acts like it was no big deal. But the fear was real. The vulnerability was genuine. He just buries it immediately because acknowledging it means acknowledging need. Season 20 introduces Heidi Turner. More on that relationship later. But there's an episode, Wieners Out, where Cartman experiences real fear of losing her. She's angry at him, threatening to break up, and he panics. Not the manipulative panic he uses on his mom. Real panic. Because Heidi chose him. Someone actually wanted to be with him voluntarily, and the possibility of losing that terrifies him in a way nothing else does. He'll give up schemes, change behavior, do whatever it takes to keep her. Because she's proof he's not completely unlovable. The fear is so visceral that he almost becomes a different person. Almost. As long as the relationship serves him, he'll maintain it. But the second it becomes inconvenient, he'll destroy it. Still, that fear was real. That moment of genuine terror at being abandoned existed. These aren't challenges he can scheme his way out of. They're quiet realizations. Does anyone actually care about him? Would anyone choose to be around him if they didn't have to? What happens when manipulation stops working? When people see through the performance? When he's left with just himself and discovers there's not much there worth keeping? This is the cave. Not a physical place, but somewhere inside him. It's the spot where the narcissism cracks just enough to see through, where the confidence he's always had starts to feel hollow, where the voice that usually tells him he's better than everyone else goes quiet for just a moment. But here's the thing that matters. He doesn't quit. Even when he's at his lowest, when loneliness hits, when people finally walk away, and when everything tells him to maybe, possibly, consider changing, he doesn't fundamentally shift. He adapts, finds new targets, new people to manipulate, new schemes to fill the void. He briefly becomes better just long enough to secure what he needs, then reverts. The loneliness gets buried under new projects. The vulnerability gets covered with fresh cruelty. Look, we all fear being fundamentally unlikable. Most of us deal with that fear by trying to be better people, by developing genuine qualities others might value, by building real connections based on mutual respect. Cartman deals with it by doubling down, by deciding that if people don't like the real him, he'll just get better at making them like the fake him. That's not growth. That's evolution without wisdom. His biggest battle wasn't with anyone else. It was with the possibility that he's unlovable, and he chose to reject that possibility rather than address why it might be true. Because addressing it would require looking at himself honestly, seeing the damage he's caused, acknowledging that his actions have consequences in other people's lives. He can't do that. The narcissism won't allow it. So the cave becomes just another place he visits and leaves. Another moment of vulnerability that gets buried. Another opportunity for growth that turns into just another story he tells himself about why everyone else is wrong. And maybe that's the saddest part. Not that he's alone, but that he chooses to be, every single day. With every scheme, every manipulation, every moment of cruelty, he's building the walls that keep everyone out. Then he wonders why it's so cold in here. The world keeps spinning. Cartman keeps scheming. And the question nobody asks is whether he even knows how lonely he actually is. Or if he's so committed to the performance that he's fooled himself into believing he doesn't need anyone. That isolation is strength. That being alone means he's won. Cartman's biggest challenge isn't a villain or a scheme gone wrong. It's the crushing realization that he might be fundamentally alone. What happens when narcissism meets reality? For most people, it's a moment of growth. For Cartman, it's just another problem to manipulate his way out of. And that brings us to the biggest question of his entire story, the one that defines everything that comes after. Can Cartman change? The show decides to answer that question definitively, and the answer is worse than anyone expected. In season 20, something unprecedented happens. Cartman gets a girlfriend, not through manipulation or schemes, but because someone actually chooses him. Heidi Turner sees past the reputation, past the cruelty, past everything we know about Eric Cartman, and decides he deserves a chance. For a while, it seems like maybe, just maybe, this is it. The relationship that changes him. The person who brings out something better. But this isn't a redemption story. It's a slow-motion disaster that proves exactly who Cartman is when you scratch beneath the surface. Season 20 centers around social media toxicity. Everyone's addicted to their phones, trolling each other, destroying relationships through constant connectivity. Heidi deletes all her social media to escape the negativity. Cartman, trying to prove Kyle wrong about something, also deletes his accounts. This shared experience becomes their bond. Two people stepping away from the noise, finding each other in the quiet. Their first interactions are shockingly sweet. Cartman holds her hand, listens when she talks, acts considerate in ways we've never seen before. He takes her to the pumpkin patch, makes genuine effort to understand her interests, shows vulnerability about his own insecurities. It's jarring, uncomfortable even, like watching someone play a role they've studied but never quite understood. But here's the thing. It works. Heidi's happy. Cartman seems happy. The other kids watch in disbelief, waiting for the scheme to reveal itself, waiting for the moment when Cartman's true nature resurfaces and everything falls apart. It doesn't happen right away. For months of showtime, the relationship continues. Cartman maintains the performance, does the boyfriend things, says the right words, shows up when he's supposed to, and people start wondering, maybe he really has changed. Maybe love actually reached something inside him that consequences never could. Maybe Heidi's the person who finally broke through. Season 21 starts the same way. They're still together, still functioning, but small cracks appear. In Put It Down, episode 2, there's a moment, brief, easy to miss. Cartman makes a comment about Heidi's weight, not overtly cruel, just observational with an edge. She brushes it off, but something shifts in his expression, like he's testing. Seeing how far he can push before she pushes back. She doesn't push back, so he pushes further. By doubling down, episode 7, the dynamic has completely inverted. Cartman's openly critical of Heidi now, commenting on what she eats, how she looks, making jokes at her expense. And when she gets upset, he flips it, tells her she's being too sensitive, that he's just trying to help her be healthy, that if she really loved him, she'd accept his feedback as caring. This is gaslighting. Textbook gaslighting, making someone question their own perception of reality. Heidi starts doubting herself. Maybe she is too sensitive. Maybe he is just trying to help. Maybe her reaction is the problem, not his behavior. If you've been in a relationship like this, you know the pattern. The slow erosion of self-trust. The way cruelty gets repackaged as concern. The confusion of trying to figure out if you're overreacting or being abused. It's not loud, not dramatic, just a steady drip of poison disguised as care. Cartman's projection reaches absurd levels. He starts calling Heidi fat, her, Heidi, who's thin, while he's objectively overweight. The irony is so blatant it should be funny, but it's not, because projection isn't about truth. It's about control, about making the other person defend themselves against accusations that have nothing to do with reality. And it works. Heidi starts changing her behavior to accommodate his criticism, watches what she eats, modifies how she dresses, tries to be whatever version of herself he'll approve of. The harder she tries, the more he criticizes, because the criticism was never about her behavior. It was about maintaining control. Then something worse happens. Heidi starts acting like Cartman. In Moss Piglet's episode 8, you can see it clearly. She's adopting his mannerisms, his way of speaking, his cruelty toward others. When Kyle tries to talk to her, tries to point out what's happening, she responds with Cartman's logic, Cartman's justifications. She's not just being influenced, she's being transformed. This is what extended exposure to abusive narcissism does. You either escape or you become it. The behavior gets normalized. The cruelty becomes your baseline. You start treating others the way you're being treated because that's what relationship looks like now. The other kids watch in horror. This isn't Heidi anymore. It's Cartman with a different face. He's not just dating her, he's colonizing her personality, remaking her in his image. And she's letting him, because by this point, she's so deep in the manipulation, she can't see out. Kyle finally intervenes. Has to. Because watching Heidi become Cartman is too much even for someone who's seen everything Cartman's capable of. He corners her, shows her what's happening, makes her see the progression, forces her to acknowledge that she's not herself anymore. In Splatty Tomato, episode 10, Heidi breaks up with him. It takes Kyle's intervention, but she does it, walks away, reclaims herself, and Cartman's reaction is perfect. He doesn't self-reflect, doesn't acknowledge what he did to her. He's just angry that he lost. Within episodes, he's rewriting the narrative, telling people she was crazy, that he dodged a bullet, that she was the problem all along. The relationship that seemed like it might change him becomes another story he tells himself about being a victim, about how he tried to love someone and they betrayed him. The Heidi Turner relationship is Cartman's ordeal, his test, the chance to prove he's capable of growth. And he fails spectacularly, not because he doesn't try, but because trying for Cartman means performing goodness while his core remains untouched. He learns the words, the gestures, the appearance of empathy, but beneath it all, he's still the same kid who fed Scott Tenorman his parents, still the same narcissist who needs control more than connection. Think about what this relationship reveals. For months he maintained the act, said the right things, did the boyfriend activities, looked like he was changing from the outside, and maybe, for brief moments, he even believed it himself, believed he was capable of loving someone without consuming them. But the second the relationship felt secure, the second Heidi was invested enough that leaving became harder, the mask started slipping. First in small ways, little tests, then bigger, then completely, until she was trapped in a dynamic where leaving meant admitting she'd been wrong about him, and staying meant losing herself. That's sophisticated manipulation. That's not cartoon villainy. That's real abuse psychology. Love bombing to establish attachment, gradual normalization of criticism, gaslighting to prevent escape, projection to keep the victim defensive. It's a playbook, and Cartman runs it perfectly. The relationship doesn't end because Heidi finally sees who he is. It ends because Kyle forces her to see. Left to their own devices, Cartman would have kept going, kept eroding her, kept remaking her, until there was nothing of Heidi left except the parts that served him. And Cartman's response isn't self-reflection, it's finding new targets, new schemes, new ways to avoid the truth that's staring him in the face. He's incapable of real connection, incapable of loving someone without destroying them, incapable of seeing another person as fully human rather than object to possess. This is the moment when the show answers the question definitively. Can Cartman change? No, he can perform change. He can mimic empathy. He can do all the right things for all the wrong reasons. But fundamental transformation? Growth from his core? Actually valuing another person more than his own ego? That's not in him. And maybe that's the most honest thing South Park has ever said. Some people don't change. They just get better at pretending. The relationship that should have saved him becomes the relationship that proves he can't be saved. Not because love isn't powerful, but because you can't love someone into being a better person if they're fundamentally committed to staying terrible. All you can do is get consumed in the process. Heidi escapes. Eventually, after damage is done, after parts of herself are compromised, but she escapes, and that's something. She learned what Cartman is beneath the performance, learned it the hard way, but learned it. Cartman learned nothing, except maybe that he can maintain a facade longer than anyone expected, that he can seem human enough to fool someone into loving him, and that when it falls apart, he can rewrite it as their failure, not his. So what happens after your biggest test proves you're exactly who everyone thought you were? What does Cartman do when he's been given every chance to grow and chose manipulation instead? Most stories would end here, with the villain defeated or redeemed. But Cartman's story isn't most stories. Because after everything, after all the chances and all the failures, he just keeps going. And the world has to decide what to do with someone who refuses to be anything other than what he is. You'd think that after everything Cartman's been through, breaking someone's mind, losing the only real relationship he had, proving himself incapable of growth, there'd be some reckoning. Maybe a character reformation arc, maybe consequences that finally stick. But that's not how Cartman's world works. Instead of a redemption, life just goes back to normal. The boys still hang out at the bus stop. School still happens. Leanne still enables him. And Cartman still manipulates, schemes, and refuses to acknowledge any of it. Seasons 22 through 25 play out like nothing fundamental changed. New schemes with familiar patterns. New targets with old tactics. The show's episodic reset button keeps hitting, and Cartman keeps benefiting from it. But here's the thing. Nothing's changed and everything has. South Park keeps spinning. Cartman keeps being Cartman. But now we know. This is who he is. This is who he'll always be. After the Heidi relationship implodes, there's no learning curve. No period of reflection where he processes what happened. He just moves on to the next thing. In season 23, Mexican Joker, he's advocating for keeping immigrant children in detention centers, making jokes about their suffering, creating new schemes that hurt new people. The cruelty isn't diminished by his recent failure at humanity. If anything, it's refined. He's learned something from the Heidi experience, just not the thing he should have learned. He learned that he can perform empathy convincingly enough to fool people, that relationships are another system to game, that if you study the patterns of human connection, you can fake them well enough to get what you want. Then when it falls apart, you can rewrite yourself as the victim. That's what he brings back from his ordeal. Not wisdom, not growth, refined manipulation, better masks, more sophisticated lies. Watch how he operates in later seasons. The schemes are still there, but they're wrapped in different packaging. He's learned to weaponize social justice language, to hide bigotry behind concern, to make cruelty look like care. The Heidi relationship taught him that people want to believe he's capable of change. So now he gives them just enough performance to maintain that hope, while never actually changing. In season 23, Banned in China, the show shifts focus to Randy's storyline, but Cartman's still there, still scheming, still the same. The episode doesn't dwell on him because there's nothing new to say. He's reached his final form. The question isn't whether he'll change anymore, it's how much damage he'll do while staying exactly the same. Then come the post-COVID specials, the movies that flash forward 40 years, and we see adult Cartman. He's married, has 3 kids, lives in a modest home, wears a yarmulke, converted to Judaism, changed his name. The entire setup screams redemption arc. Look, the show seems to say, Even Cartman can grow up. Even he can become something better given enough time. Kyle doesn't buy it, can't buy it. He spent 40 years knowing Cartman, watching his schemes, seeing through his lies. And this perfect transformation, it's too convenient, too complete, too exactly what Cartman would do if he was running the longest con of his life. The special plays it ambiguous at. First, maybe Cartman really did change. Maybe becoming a husband and father actually reached something in him. Maybe Judaism gave him a moral framework he could finally connect with. The show lets that possibility breathe, lets us wonder. Then it reveals the truth. Cartman's transformation isn't real, it's strategic. He studied Kyle's life, saw that Kyle was miserable, alone, still obsessing over their childhood conflicts, and realized that the cruelest thing he could do, the ultimate victory, was to become exactly what Kyle always wanted him to be. Not for real, as performance, as proof that Kyle wasted his life fighting someone who could change whenever it suited him. Every aspect of his new life is calculated. The wife, who conveniently never appears on screen in ways that confirm she's real. The kids who serve as props in his performance. The conversion to Judaism specifically designed to twist the knife in Kyle's psyche. It's not redemption. It's the longest, most elaborate scheme he's ever run. And it's working. Kyle's consumed by it, driven half-mad trying to prove Cartman's faking. While Cartman sits back, plays the reformed family man, and watches Kyle destroy himself with obsession. The scheme doesn't require Cartman to do anything active. Just maintain the facade and let Kyle's own nature do the rest. That's sophistication, that's evolution. Not of character, but of methodology. Young Cartman would have rubbed Kyle's face in it. Adult Cartman knows that the cruelest victories are the quiet ones. The ones where you make someone question their own sanity. Where you gaslight reality itself. When the timeline resets, when they go back and change events, Cartman loses this future. But he doesn't lose the capacity for it. Somewhere in him, that 40-year scheme exists as potential, ready to deploy whenever the opportunity presents itself. Let's be honest, that's not how heroes finish, right? We expect character development, earned wisdom, maybe a hint of redemption. Instead, we get confirmation that given 40 years and a family, Cartman would use them as weapons in a psychological war. Nothing looks different from the outside, but everything's hollow. Performance all the way down. Back in the present timeline, post-COVID specials, Cartman continues. Season 25 and beyond show him doing exactly what he's always done. The world changes around him. Social norms evolve. New controversies emerge. And Cartman adapts his tactics while keeping his core completely untouched. He's like a virus that mutates just enough to avoid detection, but maintains its essential function. In the 90s and early 2000s, his bigotry was loud and obvious. Now it's coded, hidden behind plausible deniability, wrapped in language that makes calling it out seem like overreaction. That's the evolution. Not becoming better, becoming harder to pin down. Learning which buttons push the most damage with the least obvious fingerprints. Understanding that in modern discourse, you can be as terrible as you want as long as you maintain enough ambiguity that people argue about your intent instead of your impact. Here's the truth nobody wants to admit. Coming back is harder than leaving. You've changed. They haven't. And now what? Except in Cartman's case, he hasn't changed and nobody else has either. The world keeps offering him chances to grow. He keeps declining. And life continues anyway because the universe doesn't actually enforce narrative consequences. Think about it. He's committed atrocities, plural, multiple acts that would land normal people in prison or psychiatric facilities, and he's still just going to school, still just living with his mom, still just being Cartman. The show's episodic format becomes his greatest protection. Each episode resets to baseline. Consequences evaporate. Justice never arrives. And maybe that's the point. Maybe South Park isn't trying to show us redemption, because redemption isn't universal. Some people don't get better. They just get older. More sophisticated in their awfulness. Better at hiding it, or justifying it, or making it seem like something other than what it is. Cartman brings back something to South Park, but it's not hope like SpongeBob. It's not wisdom or growth or earned humility. He brings back proof that some people will never change no matter how many chances they get. That empathy can't be taught to someone who sees other people as tools. That manipulation can be refined infinitely, while the manipulator stays fundamentally the same. Look, we've been sold this lie that everyone has good in them. That given the right circumstances, the right relationships, the right incentives, anyone can become better. Cartman's story cuts through that fantasy. His soft moments aren't weakness hiding his strength. They're manipulation hiding his vulnerability. His moments of apparent growth aren't progress. They're strategy. He's not teaching South Park to avoid pain. He's showing them that some pain is permanent because the person causing it will never stop. That you can't fix someone who doesn't believe they're broken. That the only defense against someone like Cartman is recognizing what they are and maintaining distance. The show handles this honestly. Doesn't force a redemption that would ring false. Doesn't pretend that time or love or consequences necessarily change people. Just shows us someone who's decided who they are and refuses all invitations to be anything else. In recent seasons, you can see how the other characters have adjusted. They don't expect better from Cartman anymore. They just brace for impact. Kyle still fights him, but there's resignation in it now. Not hope that this time will be different, just commitment to opposing him regardless of outcome. Stan defaults to "God damn it, Cartman" faster now. Less surprise, more inevitability. Even Butters, sweet Butters, has developed a wariness. Still gets manipulated, but there's a split second of hesitation before he falls for it. Like somewhere in him, pattern recognition is trying to break through. And Leanne, still enabling, still giving in, still refusing to set boundaries that might actually help her son become functional. The cycle continues because she won't break it, and Cartman knows she won't, has built his entire psychological framework on that certainty. If you're liking this video so far, then don't forget to hit the like button. It really helps. So what does Cartman bring back to South Park after all his trials? Recognition. The ability to see manipulation before it works. To understand that some people perform empathy while feeling none. To accept that not everyone gets a redemption arc because not everyone wants one. His story loops back to the bus stop. Same corner, same kids, same basic dynamics. But when Kyle says, "God damn it, Cartman," it means something different now. It's not frustration at another scheme. It's resignation at who Cartman has always been and will always be. Acceptance that this is the fight. Forever. Because Cartman isn't going to stop being Cartman, and Kyle isn't going to stop opposing him. That's the equilibrium, not resolution, but acknowledgement. They've reached the point where everyone knows exactly who Cartman is, and he's fine with that. Doesn't need them to like him. Doesn't need approval or validation or genuine connection. Just needs the game to continue. Needs people to react to. Needs the friction of opposition, because without it, what's the point? The show has evolved around him too. Early seasons presented him as comic relief. Offensive? Sure, but ultimately a joke. Later seasons acknowledge what they've created. A character whose cruelty isn't funny anymore because it's too real. Too close to actual abuse patterns and narcissistic behavior. The laughter gets uncomfortable because we recognize it. That recognition is what Cartman brings back. Not a warning exactly, more like documentation. This is what unchecked narcissism looks like. This is how manipulation evolves. This is what happens when someone learns that consequences don't apply to them. Watch closely, take notes, because you'll meet versions of Cartman in your real life, and the show has just given you a field guide. People around him shift because of it. Not dramatically, not overnight, but it's there. They're more cautious, less willing to give benefit of doubt. They've learned that taking Cartman at face value is dangerous, that his moments of apparent kindness are usually setups for something worse. That's growth, just not Cartman's growth. Everyone else grows around him, develops defense mechanisms, learns boundaries, understands when to engage and when to just let him tire himself out. While he stays static, they evolve in response to his stasis. And Cartman? He just keeps showing up. Not to fix everything, but to be present for it with his schemes, his manipulations, and his absolute refusal to examine himself. His real legacy isn't the catchphrases or the memorable episodes. It's a stubborn insistence that no matter how messy life gets, he's still right and everyone else is wrong. Still worth it to be cruel if it means winning. Still worth it to hurt people if it means he doesn't have to change. His story loops back to normal, but when he says something terrible now, when the next scheme starts forming, everyone knows. This is just who he is, always was, always will be. The road back was never about becoming someone new. It was about everyone finally accepting who he truly was. Someone who would rather manipulate than connect, control than grow, win than be loved. That's not weakness or fear hiding underneath. That's the choice he makes every single day. And South Park, having tried everything else, just has to live with it. Just like the rest of us have to live with the Cartmans in our world. The ones who won't change, who can't be fixed, who we just have to recognize and survive. Eric Cartman doesn't end his story with growth or redemption or a statue carved in his image. He ends it exactly where it began, at the bus stop, in his house, with his mom who never says no and his friends who can't escape him. Let's be honest, that's not how heroes finish, right? We expect character development, earned wisdom, maybe a hint of self-awareness. Instead, he's at the same corner eating the same cheesy poofs, running the same schemes. Nothing looks different, but everything is. Because after all the schemes, the cruelties, the chances at growth, Cartman came back with something no redemption arc could create. Not change, not growth, just undeniable proof of who he is. And isn't that the point? The road back was never about coming home transformed. It was about everyone else finally seeing clearly. The kind of clarity that doesn't need recognition, that doesn't expect him to suddenly develop empathy. Or if Kyle still calls him out, it's not surprise anymore. Just documentation. So what does Cartman bring back to South Park? Recognition. The ability to see manipulation before it works. To understand that some people perform empathy while feeling none. To accept that not everyone gets a redemption arc because not everyone wants one. His story loops back to the bus stop. But when Kyle says, "God damn it, Cartman," it carries decades of understanding. Not frustration at being fooled again. Acceptance that this is who Cartman has always been and will always be. If you enjoyed this analysis, make sure to subscribe. Because understanding the villains we laugh at, that's how we recognize them when they're not cartoons.